And it's really hard to say to someone, expect rejection. I was always told, oh, be yourself, be yourself, be yourself. And actually, there's that lovely quote, isn't it? Be yourself, everyone else is taken. And I said it seems a funny thing because we're never quite sure when we've reached adulthood. I feel I should be there now.
Welcome to A Beginner's Guide to Being a Grown-Up, my passion project to interview really interesting people about their lives and the things that they have learned. And today I am super lucky to have with me Sarah Salway. Sarah, thank you for joining us. So a little bit about Sarah. She's a former Canterbury laureate and a Royal Literary Fund Fellow of the London School of Economics, and has taught creative writing at a postgraduate level at the University of Kent, my university, and the University of Sussex. She is also a mentor for the Royal Literary Fund, helping to run reading groups around the country, and is passionate about how writing and reading for pleasure is also really good for your well-being and your mental health. She has a Substack called Everyday Words, and I'm sure we'll talk about that. She is an author with 3 novels, 2 short fiction collections, and 3 poetry collections under her belt, one of which I have here, and also one of which has won the joint winner of the Geoff Stevens Memorial Award. She trained as a journalism at the London College of Fashion, and has worked for Lynne Franks PR, Cosmo, Time Out, and the Scotsman newspaper. So Sarah, thank you for joining us today for this podcast, and welcome.
Thank you.
Just to kick off, tell us a little bit about that journey to adulthood for you.
Oh, I'm sure everybody else has said it. It seems a funny thing because we're never quite sure when we've reached adulthood. I feel I should be there now. But maybe that's one of the things that we can talk about, which is why people think of adulthood as not playing anymore, which I still think is part of my process for sure. I was at a boarding school in Ely, quite a small boarding school, one of the first girls there, so it was very much a male environment. And I loved clothes. I've always loved clothes. I've loved sewing, I love making. So I went to the London College of Fashion as this kind of kid that had been, a reasonably big deal fashion-wise at a boarding school in Ely, and ended up realizing, oh my God, there's a world out there. So it was a course in fashion journalism, and I absolutely loved it. I loved the writing bit of it. I was terrified of these children that come from London who really knew fashion and just a completely different look. But I think it's something, being an adult means that actually we've all got similarities, no matter how we present ourselves and how confident people think that they are, how important they might seem. And from there, I went into public relations and journalism. And then ended up working in London for Lynne Franks PR, which I loved, absolutely loved. I'm sure we'll talk a bit more about that. And then my husband and I decided jointly to move up to Edinburgh. I married very young actually. So I was 23 and we moved to Edinburgh, which was quite a different world, which was lovely. So probably those are the stages into early adulthood. Yeah.
Brilliant. And so you went to the London College of Fashion. Did you go to be a journalist or to do fashion? Because you came out, it seems, as a journalist. So tell me a bit about that journey.
It was a course in fashion journalism, actually. And I think as I love bits of my school, but I had felt it was a boarding school. I'd felt I don't want to. Another 3 years of university felt probably wrongly like another 3 years of school. And I wanted to be out in the world and to see it. And this course, one of the attractions was that it was just 1 year. And I was 17 when I went. So I've been working since I was 18, really.
So
yeah.
that's pretty young to have gone from that kind of very protected environment of being in a small boarding school to, as you say, London fashion school, everything going on. How did it feel at 18? You said obviously it was a bit of a shock to the system, but kind of how did you kind of navigate that first couple of years of adulthood where the world was so different to what you were used to?
Yeah, I was ready for it. I really was, and I think probably now I look back at some of the things and think, oh my God, I absolutely would not want my children doing some of the things that I did. Yeah, I think I probably left home when I went to school in some ways. So there wasn't moving from a very stable. I mean, I had a very stable childhood and home, but I look back now and I'm full of admiration at that 18-year-old actually, but like hopeless, completely hopeless. So I would spend all my money on. We didn't have much money because we weren't paid very much at that time. And like I would buy a copy of Vogue and then suddenly realise, oh my God, I've got to walk home across all of London because I spent my money on it. But it all felt worth it. I can remember once going to work and being sent home because I got like different shoes on, and it was all very kind of chaotic, but fun.
Yeah, and I think when we're young, we don't know what we don't know, right? So we don't know what to be scared of. Or I love the fact that your priority was Vogue first,
Yeah,
over and above your ability to get a bus home. That's
yeah,
brilliant.
yeah.
So tell me a little bit more about how you got into. Obviously, you were a journalist, but into writing and the novels and the poetry. Where did that come from? Obviously, that reading's obviously been deep in you all your life, but where did that kind of desire to write novels and poetry come from?
Well, I was. I grew up. Both my parents wrote books. My father was a journalist. And my mother. I grew up on a herb garden, actually, a herb farm that was open to the public, and she wrote books about herbs. This was also in the late 70s when she was quite a hippie looking back, and I was completely horrified by that whole idea. Now I wish I'd learned more. So that's one of the things. Now I wish I kind of sucked all the information that she could give me. But I always loved to read, and I was the youngest of four, and I was really shy. I think I'm still quite shy, but you learn to mask that. Really shy and very happy with my own company. So I would sit and read with the dog, and that would be like my idea of bliss. And then words. I love words, but also growing up in that household, I didn't know that you couldn't. So, and I think that's one of the things when I work with students, they're like, yeah, but people like me can't. We're not writers. We're not. And I'm like, no, honestly, but I didn't have that. I just like putting words together and playing with words. So I always knew I wanted to do something with writing, and journalism just seemed amazing, which it is amazing actually as a career. I then, when we were in Scotland, I did a lot of work as a freelance with the Scotsman, and I was doing several 800-word articles a week. I had got to the stage where I didn't even have to use word count. My head was like this, and now and I think I can't remember the one moment. It wasn't like the a real thing, but I sort of thought, actually, I love words and I love writing, but I've stopped enjoying it so much. And I found a drop-in course at Edinburgh University on creative writing, 2 hours a week, I think it was, just a drop-in course for women. And I just went along, and it was like, oh my God, you can make it up. You can have that. I mean, now we know that some journalism is made up, but anyway, at that time, we didn't. Oh, I didn't. And it was just, everything opened. It was the most wonderful moment. But my first short stories were all 800 words. So like I had to break that pattern quite a lot. Yeah, and then the creative writing took over. Poetry came later.
Because is it? I mean, I'm not a writer by trade, obviously, because I work in finance. But is there a big difference between the skill of writing poetry versus writing novels versus kind of writing factual kind of articles? Is that a journey you have to go through to kind of learn the different skills?
Yes, and I just want to take you up on I'm not a writer, I work in finance, actually, because
I knew the minute I said that I was going to get called on that. Okay.
I think that what we all do is tell a story. So you know, this is what you're doing here, but also this is what you do in your work. We're putting things into a container, if you like, a story container, narrative container. But actually the page can be terrifying for people. It isn't for me at all. There's nothing better than a blank page. So I have had to learn that for some people that is like almost the worst thing that you could ask them to do is to fill a blank page, start from nothing. But
you've literally just described me, Sarah.
Well, we have to work together. I'll break that for you. I think because I had been a journalist, and because one of the things that I loved about journalism, I'm nosy. I love finding out about things, and people will talk to you. So sometimes you've got to tell them to stop. You realise, or at least alert them to the fact that what they're saying is going to be made public. It's putting the things together, making a pattern of facts and seeing where they fit in. And that's probably why I'm saying, finance is part of that story. It's like seeing where things fit in order to make a cohesive whole. And the fiction was part of that as well. Poetry, I was taught poetry by people that loved it. So I was lucky from that point of view. But I was taught poetry as something that you could get wrong. And I think that that has changed a lot, but I think it's still there. So it's like there's certain craft things that I was certainly in my head. There was something going on that I've got to get this right, rather than thinking of those as tools that I can use that actually are, again, are fun to play with. I think it's a very physical thing, writing. You've got your materials, almost like building a house or something, and it's where they fit together. So that I got a commission to write my first poem, actually, and I was absolutely terrified. And I've heard that from other novelists as well. It's fine to write a novel. We can go away and be in an imaginary world, but there's something about keeping it short. Yeah.
Yes, I think keeping things. I think someone said to me once is like to write a report. You can write a really long report, but it doesn't take as much skill as being able to put something really succinctly into a really small amount. And obviously you got that from the journalism and having to keep down to your 800 words as well. So thinking about that journey you've been on and kind of going from probably your 18-year-old self, never thinking about you'd ever get commissioned to write a poem. What would, if your 18-year-old self could see you now, what would they recognise and what would they be like, wow, I'd never have imagined that?
I think they would never imagine that I'd be married for like over 30 years and living in Tunbridge Wells. I was going to go and live in Paris and join a circus and things like that. I think what I would hope my 18-year-old is still proud of me for doing is following curiosity and actually not following the herd, as it were, but my own instincts. And also, we mentioned earlier, playing still.
Yeah, excellent. And in terms of those kind of experiences, things like taking that leap of writing a poem for the first time, what are the kind of difficult experiences you've had with kind of rejection or failure that have kind of really taught you something?
I didn't, as I say, I didn't go to university. I did Open University when the children were little. Mm-hmm. But I did an MA in creative writing at the University of Glamorgan. And one of the things we were taught there is if you're a writer, you expect rejection. So actually your normal status in writing is that you're going to be rejected. Okay. And so I was quite kind of wired for that, especially when being a journalist, some bits don't get in the paper or some bits get changed or whatever. But so that's fine actually, which probably is an odd thing to say. You have to develop a different level, and you also have to separate your work from yourself a bit more, which I think is difficult. I think that's probably one of the things that I've learned. I also am aware, again, from teaching and working with a lot of writers, that actually the ones that make it through aren't necessarily the best ones. They're the ones that sit in the chair and keep going, and keep learning, keep trying new things.
I think that's fascinating, that just because of the world that you operate in from a very early age, that rejection piece just became part of life. And I think that's a real skill, isn't it? Because I think a lot of people would really struggle with that, because if it doesn't happen too much, or you're not told this is normal and it's going to happen, that it comes a bit of a shock when it does. So it's a really interesting skill to have acquired at an early age. And do you see that in the people that you teach as well, or do you see that that's something they have to learn to develop?
Yeah, it's a balance, I think, because you're not just shoving stuff out and think, oh well, it might get rejected. You're still putting your best stuff out, and you're working to kind of make it the best that you can. And so it is a balance. I do see that, and it's really hard to say to someone, expect rejection. But yeah, I mean, I also, it's really helped. I've edited magazines and anthologies, and actually what I see is that it's not always bad work that gets rejected. Sometimes it's because you want a balance, and the New York do a wonderful podcast, obviously not as good as yours, but they had I think it was Joyce Carol Oates, and I can't remember who the other, but like really big names, and they were saying, last week I got a piece rejected by, and I had to I rewind it and listened, because I was like, oh my god, people are still
I think that resilience is a really important skill in life, isn't it? Of kind of accepting that things don't always go your way, and just finding a way around, a way over or around, I think is a real skill. In terms of kind of the decisions of your life, you said you got married very young, and obviously you're still married 30 odd years later and lived in different bits of the country. And what's the best decision you've made as an adult?
You sort of kind of led into that, so it probably was my marriage, the choice of husband, perhaps. He'll love it.
Just the marriage.
Just getting married, that was it, and then I could sit back. Actually probably leads on to something else, actually, which is it's such a cliche, but I did marry my best friend, and he has stayed my best friend. We've had like friendships, we've had arguments, so it's not all amazing, but the friendships probably, I would say, are some of my best decisions. Some of the ones that have stayed. I was quite an odd little girl. I was like a really odd little girl, and probably stayed odd. And I mean, so much so that my daughter at one stage said, I never want you to speak in public about your childhood again, because it's just too weird. but you meet your own weird people.
Yeah.
And actually, I'm not always good at it, but if I would say make decisions, it's like keeping up with them as much as I can. And yeah.
Excellent. I think it's really interesting so that those connections, those human connections, friendships, your partner are so important. Especially since you were quite introverted as a child. You're quite an introvert, so that sometimes must be quite a challenge to put yourself out there and go and mingle with people.
Such an interesting thing about writers. I don't know if you've interviewed other writers, or you will, and we talk about this quite a lot, particularly if we teach or do any events, because you're spending ages on your own in your own little world with your computer, and then you're expected to go out and entertain or to teach. So you're putting on the different levels. So when you're writing, you kind of got to open yourself as much as you can. So you know that there's something on the page that's you. But then teaching, you've got to protect yourself a bit. You can't kind of go out into the world as a bleeding heart everywhere, really, and survive.
Yeah, well, yeah, absolutely. One of the things I wanted to talk to you about is the reading groups that you do. I'm really interested as to kind of how you got involved in that and what it brings to you and what you've learned from being involved in that around that well-being and mental health piece and reading.
So I trained, there's an organisation in America, actually, the Centre for Journal Therapy, and I trained with them to do writing for wellbeing. So I have worked in that field. The reading groups are part of the Royal Literary Fund, which is a charity set up for writers, but to bring writing into the wider world. And these are groups which run for 30 weeks in different parts of Britain, and they're run by a writer, and each week the writer will bring a short story and a poem to discuss with a very diverse group of people who commit to coming for 30 weeks. And honestly, they're magical. I mean, now I help to run them, so I go and visit a lot of them. And within about 3 weeks, people will be saying, this is the highlight of my week. Wow. And I've never thought about this before, but now I'm talking about this. And then I've never thought what it's like to be in this situation. And there's a very open discussion about the poem and the short story, which brings that kind of community together, I think. I suppose why I think it's so important, why I'm passionate about it, is that I think reading fiction, reading poetry, actually rewires, if you like, the empathy in our brains, and actually allows us to experience a completely different world. One we might not want to stay in, but that doesn't matter because we can close the book or go and read something different. But it's a way of understanding different situations that we're not getting in newspapers, we're not getting in radio. And actually, I think with lockdown as well, we're quite often in our own echo chamber, even with friends.
Yeah, and I think it's very immersive, isn't it? You can't read a poem or a book of fiction whilst doing something else.
No.
So you can only do one thing. And I think the world at the moment is we're so busy. You can watch TV and be on your phone and, be on a call and do emails. Not that I'd ever do that. But it's so easy to multitask, isn't it? And actually just reading, I find, curling up I've got a big sofa that I can curl up on, and that with a good book, there is something incredibly comforting.
Yeah.
About just being able to do one thing. You can't be doing things all over here when you're reading.
Yeah.
And that
I think so. Yeah, and I think it's a privilege, isn't it, to read. You read widely and widely, and you're reading authors from all over the world. It's a real privilege, I think, to learn about different lifestyles. But because you've used a word that I feel really strongly about being a grown-up then, which is multitask. And I think for years women were sold a complete, misstep about, oh, women are so good at multitasking. I mean, one of the joys of being a grown-up is actually you don't have to do that.
You get to have that choice.
Well, you can do one thing and actually, you know, enjoy it. Then you can do something else, but you don't, you know, it's just a way of saying, oh, you can organise all these different things, so I don't have to, I think.
Yeah, I love that. So we talked a little bit about your best decision, which is your partnerships and your friendships. One of the things I'm really interested about when I talk to people is when we get given advice a lot, especially as women, I feel. And some of it's good advice, some of it's not so good advice. What's the best piece of advice you have ever been given that you chose to ignore? So it felt like really good advice, but you decided to go off in another route.
I thought about this quite a lot, actually. I've thought about it quite a lot now. I've got completely blank. I was always told, oh, be yourself, be yourself, be yourself. And actually, you know, there's that lovely quote, isn't it? Be yourself, everyone else is taken. And I think that's brilliant advice. I think that I have struggled a lot about doing that because it's quite brave advice, you know, brave to do that. And I think there's the safety of being in a pack that sometimes I've followed. Does that make sense? You know, so I'm still working on that really.
We're all a work in progress.
We're all a work in progress.
All a work in progress. So
I can remember with my sister once, we're like, oh, we're so tired of the journey. Can't we just get there?
But the joy is in the journey, right?
Yeah, the joy is in the journey.
But it can be exhausting. I think you're probably right. That brings me to my last question. I think that's really interesting. That kind of being yourself is sometimes quite hard to do. Is if you could put one thing in that beginner's guide, if I turned it into a book and you could put one thing that you would tell someone who's just joining the world of being a grown-up and an adult, what would be the thing that you would put into the guide?
I'm so clear on this because it's something I've really told my children and like try to work with them on that. And that's just because you're good at something doesn't mean that it's the right thing for you.
Wow, I love that.
I think sometimes people say, oh, you're so good at this, you say, you know, whatever. I mean, in PR, I used to worry myself sick organising press parties and events and things like that. And they worked well because I put so much work into it. But it wasn't the right thing for me to do.
That's really, I think that's an amazing, this is what I love about doing this podcast is everybody's answers are so different. But that is such an amazing piece of advice, which is it doesn't, even if you've got the skill, it's got to be something you enjoy.
Yeah.
It's got to be something that brings you joy and you can build on, right?
Yeah. And not something that makes us ill. And I think so many of us kind of get stressed out because we're good at something, but yeah, we could be better doing something else.
I love that. That's definitely going in the book. So thank you. Sarah, thank you for your time today. It's been really fascinating talking about your life and your journey and the things that you've learned and a bit more about everybody's a writer, I think is what I've taken away from that. Maybe I'll sign up for one of your creative courses.
Oh, yeah, that'd be brilliant.
We'll definitely share it in the show notes, the Literary Fund reading program, because I think that also sounds amazing to give more people access to the joy of reading for pleasure. So thank you. Appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
Awesome. Welcome to a beginner's guide to being a grown-up. I'm Sam Cooper-Gray and this is my passion project to learn more about people who inspire me and their secrets to being a grown-up. Join us on this journey as we learn about their highs and their lows and what they would put in the guide.